Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is in Shanghai for the reopening ceremony of the headquarters of the Korean Provisional Government that operated during Japan's colonial occupation of Korea. The recent market rout in China and a possible US rate hike have some analysts worried about the possible knock-on effect on the Korean economy. Are those fears justified? We'll take a closer look. Plus, as the misery and fear deepens in Europe, Germany and France call for the fair distribution of refugees throughout the European Union. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's midday on Friday, September 4th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, President Park Geun-hye, who's in Shanghai on the final leg of a three-day trip to China, attended a ceremony this morning to mark the reopening of what used to be the headquarters of Korea's provisional government during Japan's colonial rule. We have our presidential office correspondent Choi Yusun on the line for details. Yusun.
Mark, on her final day in China, President Park commemorated Korea's fight for independence from Japan's colonial rule by participating in a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the old offices here in Shanghai that were occupied by Korea's government in exile between 1926 and 1932. In an address, the Korean president emphasized the significance of witnessing the reopening of the old headquarters on the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan's colonization. She also thanked the Chinese government and the city of Shanghai for their support, including the almost $600,000 that went into renovating the offices. President Park also had a chance to meet the descendants of Korea's independence fighters of the colonial period, like Lee Seung-man, the first head of the provisional government who would later become Korea's first president, and Kim Il-woo, the last head of the government in exile. Mark?
And Yusun, President Park talked about emphasizing the need to make right misunderstandings about the past.
Right. In an interview with the Chinese ruling party's mouthpiece, People Daily, President Park said Korea and China shared painful experiences from Japan's imperialistic aggressions. She then highlighted the need for countries in the region to work together to move forward based on a correct understanding of history so that wounds from the past can be healed. The Korean leader added history is something that lasts eternally and cannot be denied. Before returning home later today, President Park is scheduled to meet Koreans residing here and to attend a business forum where investors from both Korea and China will seek new opportunities to expand their cooperation. This was Choi Yusun reporting on President Park's final day in China.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Yusun, and apologies there for the relatively poor quality of the line. And now, for more on the history and legacy of the provisional government of the Republic of Korea, Park Ji-won reports.
Korea's provisional government was established in 1919 in Shanghai as a government in exile, 9 years after Japan's forceful annexation of Korea in 1910. Its establishment followed a massive nationwide independence movement against Japanese rule the same year. Prior to 1919, 7 provisional governments had been formed in various regions, including Seoul, the Chinese city of Jilin, and Vladivostok in Russia, but they decided to unite as one provisional government in Shanghai to rightfully represent Korea and facilitate the creation of independence movements. But due to the constant threat of discovery, the provisional government had to keep changing locations. During the years it was active, the exiled government fought hard to achieve liberation for Korea, both on the diplomatic front and by staging attacks on the occupying Japanese. But as diplomatic appeals to the international community largely failed, internal factions emerged. For years, Korea's provisional government was a turbulent mix of liberals, socialists, and nationalists with opposing views on which approach to take. For example, Lee Seung-man, the provisional government's first president and the man who later became South Korea's first president in 1948, emphasized diplomacy targeting Western powers. On the other hand, nationalist Kim Gu, the final president of the provisional government, believed the country could only be taken back through military force. The opposing views continued even after Korea's liberation. After the unconditional surrender of Japan and Korea's liberation in 1945, due to a deepening Cold War politics, the United States and the Soviet Union started to temporarily administer Korea by dividing the nation in two, and the provisional government was ignored. Both Lee and Kim were strongly opposed to a foreign trusteeship over Korea. But Lee hoped to have a separate government in the South to avoid the influence of communism. Kim Gu pushed hard for a unified government until his assassination in 1949. Although the role of the provisional government was ignored after Korea's liberation, its legacy remains. It was the provisional government that first proclaimed Korea to be a democratic republic, ending Korea's traditional monarchy system that had ruled the country for thousands of years. The preamble of Korea's constitution also states that it succeeds the cause of the provisional government born of the March 1st independence movement of 1919. In another demonstration of the legacy left by the government in exile, South Korea's full name in Korean, 대한민국, and its national anthem, 애국가, were first officially adopted by the provisional government. 박지원, Arirang News.
Now it appears North Korea's Korean-hye failed to hold one-on-one talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday at China's Victory Day celebrations. With the apparent souring of ties, attention now turns to whether North Korea will launch a ballistic missile in the autumn to mark the 70th anniversary of the foundation of its ruling Workers' Party. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The North Korean leader's right-hand man and secretary of the Central Committee of North Korea, Korean-hye, failed to hold one-on-one talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping during the 70th anniversary ceremony of China's World War II victory. Che also most likely failed to deliver a handwritten letter from Kim Jong-un. It remains unclear whether Che spoke to other Chinese government officials during his stay, but experts say it's unlikely the message was delivered since no meeting with the Chinese president took place. Some analysts say Che was sent to improve Beijing-Pyongyang relations, while others say the North Korean leader's decision not to attend suggests anti-Chinese sentiment. Meanwhile, there's speculation North Korea could launch a long-range missile during the 70th anniversary of the Korean Workers' Party in October. A website specializing in North Korea, 38 North, says satellite imagery has detected movements of structures of the launch pad, designed for transferring rocket components. The website added that given the low amount of activity, it is unlikely North Korea could launch a long-range rocket in the coming weeks, as launch preparations, including fueling and pressure testing, requires weeks of preparation. North Korea has enhanced its ballistic missile capabilities, including a 2012 launch that successfully put a satellite into orbit. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A handful of emerging markets have experienced unprecedented drops in their stock markets and currency following China's worse than expected economic slowdown and devaluation of its currency. And September will be another crucial month, with the US Federal Reserve set to decide on their rate hike. So, how prepared is Korea to deal with the future challenges? Song Ji-son reports.
$4 billion. That's the amount of assets foreign investors pulled from Korean stock markets last month after a surprise devaluation of the Chinese yuan magnified the country's economic slowdown. Other emerging markets also saw losses, with India and Taiwan shedding some $3 and $2 billion off their market caps. But authorities say Seoul's losses weren't as critical.
Considering our market size, foreigners' cash outflow was not as severe as it was in other Asian countries.
The Korean economy is more resilient, as it does not depend heavily on commodities or raw materials like other emerging countries. Its financial health has also improved, with its short-term debt remaining in the 30% range of total foreign borrowings, down from 50% range in 2008. Seoul's foreign reserves, ranking 6th in the world, backed by its streak of current account surplus, is another safety net for its economy. But with 1/5 of Korea's exports outbound to China, Beijing's slowing demand remains as a strong downside risk.
Korea's currency and its fluctuation is rated as stable, but the China factor could further slow growth in Seoul's real economy.
As for the Fed's possible rate hike later this year, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said Friday that it is unlikely Korea will see massive cash outflow, as investors now realize Korea is safer than other markets. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, nearly half of Korea's top businesses face a grim sales outlook this year amid the global economic slowdown. Market analysts say only 56% of the nation's 300 largest firms by stock market capitalization are expected to see their sales grow in 2015 from last year, and this is the lowest ratio since 2002. Last year, 71% of businesses saw their sales grow, with a 69% forecast. The ratio of companies with growing sales has been on a steady decline since 2011, and analysts say it will become increasingly uncommon for companies to post sales growth due to the country's slowing economic growth. Europe's refugee crisis is intensifying by the day, with the continent's leaders unable to come up with a coherent plan. In the latest flashpoint, scuffles broke out in Hungary on Thursday as refugees clashed with local authorities. Son Jong-in has more.
On Thursday, refugees who had been camped outside a railway station in Budapest surged onto the platform as soon as police withdrew. The station has become a focal point of the crisis as tens of thousands of refugees seek to reach northern and western Europe. The refugees managed to get on a train, but before long, they were forced off by police. Clashes broke out as the refugees refused to go to camps set up by the authorities, fearing they would not be treated with proper respect.
They bring us here. We don't know why.
No camp.
We don't need to stay on the camp, and we don't need to stay in Hungary.
As the humanitarian crisis deepens, EU leaders can't agree on what needs to be done. Hungary, which says it has over 2,000 refugees arriving in the country every day, plans to revise its migration laws and deport those without proper documentation.
Hungary did everything which was possible in order to keep the regulations. We create just now in the Hungarian parliament a new package of regulations. We set up a physical barrier, and all these together can provide a new situation in Hungary and in Europe from the 15th of September.
But Germany and France are urging Eastern European member states to cope with the situation together and shoulder their share of the burden. They plan to present joint proposals for a fair distribution of refugees within the EU. European Council President Donald Tusk supported the plan, saying at least 100,000 refugees should be distributed across EU member nations. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
The coffins containing the bodies of a Syrian child, 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi, his 5-year-old brother Galip and their mother Reyhan, who drowned off the coast of Turkey on Wednesday, have arrived in Istanbul. The father, Abdullah Kurdi, who tried in vain to save his family as their boat capsized, says he no longer has reason to live.
They would wake me up in the morning saying, "Daddy, let us play." Everything is gone now. I just want to sit next to the grave of my children and my wife and rest.
Kurdi and his family were among 12 refugees crammed onto a 5-meter-long rubber dinghy for the journey to the Greek island of Kos from Turkey, where they had fled to from war-stricken Syria. The photo of the 3-year-old boy has triggered fresh calls for the international community to deal with the growing refugee crisis. For a while now, it has been common for Asian arts professionals to use Western arts and philosophy as guidelines for their work, rather than their own Asian roots. But Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju is trying to change that with the opening of the Asian Arts Theatre. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Gwangju, known as the Korean City of Light, is expected to soon become a global platform for contemporary art. And at the center of it stands the 13,000 square meter Asian Arts Theater, which opens on Friday. With a lineup of some 40 productions over the next 3 weeks, the arts venue aims at becoming a space where participating artists can communicate and understand the influence their Asian identities have on their work. Among the performance pieces stand out Paling. Based on Malaysia's 1955 Baling talks, performers reenact the time when national leaders tried to resolve the country's division. failing to do so and leading to the creation of Malaysia and Singapore. Mark Tae says the Korean audience can easily relate to his work as a similar scenario took place in Korea's history.
And it's interesting to see how in a slightly different part of the world, our leaders were making similar choices. The next piece I want to do is called The Complete Future of Malaysia, which is into the future. And we would be very happy if we have the opportunity, if we get invited again to do it at the Asian Cultural Center, the Asian Arts Theatre. And also a project that's asking lots of pertinent questions about, Asia right now and what it means and the many things that it could mean.
Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Well, those are the stories we have for you on this Friday afternoon in Seoul. For more of the latest news and Arirang TV programs, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com. Have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.